did I miss?
Nikki was just saying we have to assume that this is happening.
Yeah. We are moving the children.
In big groups? By train?
That's a 2-day trip, which would mean crossing Holland.
And the Dutch have shut their borders to Jewish refugees.
And they'd have to cross Germany.
Yes, but they'd only be passing through and on British visas.
With British foster parents waiting.
Well, that is if you can find British foster parents. There are 1,000 children on that list. The welcome may not be as warm as you're all imagining.
Then we have to heat things up. We have to get the press working, get them moving, and on our side. Ordinary people wouldn't stand for this if they knew what was actually happening.
That was a clip from One Life, and I'm delighted to be joined by director James Hawes. How's it going?
It's going very well, thank you. Nice to be here.
Really lovely to speak to you again. I first spoke to you months ago, before the film was released. No one really had seen it yet, which was, you were quite anxious then, understandably.
Well, it was our first sort of test screening, really. It was a toe dip in the water just to see how audiences were going to respond. So yes, I was nervous. It's like having your homework marked, and however much, and perhaps the longer you've invested in a film, the longer you've lived with it, the harder it is to know quite how an audience fresh to the story, fresh to the film is going to respond.
How long had you been with it, just out of interest?
About 18 months.
Okay. So yeah, that's a pretty substantial amount of time.
Yeah.
Could you introduce us to the wonderful story of Nicholas Winton and the film One Life?
It's an extraordinary story, a true story about a man who in 1938-39 travelled to Prague, where he had been told by a friend that there was a real crisis with refugees fleeing from the rise of Nazism and Hitler. And what he found in Prague was so shocking to him, particularly the children who were living in fields, in ruined factories, in desperate conditions, that he decided that his 1 week of volunteering wasn't nearly enough and he needed to try and do something. This was not a professional, he was a stockbroker. He didn't have resources, he had no structures, he had to build everything from scratch with some fellow volunteers, with some colleagues, and indeed even with his mother back in London. And together as a team over the next few months, they managed to save 669 children. Most of them Jewish, but not all of them. He very much wanted to save children of all faiths and of none. Some of them were the children of people who protested against the rise of Nazism. However, that was at the end of the trains that he could get out at the time when war was then declared. And so this man, Nicholas Winton, spent the second half of his life regretting not having been able to do more, feeling guilt for it, until, and I don't want to spoil the film for those who haven't seen it, until a scrapbook with details of what he'd achieved came into the hands of a journalist and would go on, in fact, to become a YouTube clip, a viral moment, an evergreen viral moment that says a huge amount about human compassion, human decency.
I've seen that clip. I saw it, years ago, I think, when a lot of other people did on YouTube. And it only does tell a fraction of Nicholas's story. And you tell it in such an interesting way because it's set over 2 eras, neither of which are the present. So can you tell us about how you decided to weight this story in the 30s and then in the 80s? Because we have 2 kind of powerhouses of acting leading both of those storylines.
Yes, and that's been an organic process. The original script had a little bit of the older Nicky played by Sir Anthony Hopkins in the 1980s. And then we went right back to the story in the 1930s and told it in a very strict linear fashion until we rejoined the 1980s, the older man, informed then perhaps by his youth and what we'd seen he'd achieved. As we went into the production process, both filming and especially in the edit, we realized that these 2 stories could inform each other better. There were elements of mystery that could be planted into the 1980s story and clues that could be discovered, a bit like Rosebud, honestly. It's a classic Citizen Kane type of beat through the 80s that would keep you sort of drawn with the mystery of it all. And also, a lot of people coming to the film will know that he saved children from the Nazis. So what's the reveal? Well, the reveal becomes what happens to the 9th train. And that was another element that we pulled way back. So you didn't understand until late in the film what the exact purpose and point and cause of his grief was. And I think that's worked very well structurally to then switch between the two.
Yeah.
Plus,
I mean,
honestly, we're blessed by two great actors who managed to switch between themselves, I like to think, almost seamlessly.
Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.